So let's start this meeting. Thank you guys for coming for this month's TAC meeting. We have a quite packed agenda today. We will have project updates from Ip Green around VSGL, some potential process-related discussion to easily adding new frameworks into VSGL. We will also have product update from Kepler GL from me. And then in the end, we also we have another Linux Foundation membership tier update, and in general, the membership situation in UCF. Abe, are you on the call?
Yes.
Cool. I will go through your slides. Just let me know when to go next.
Yes, so it's a very exciting development is that we're in the process of transferring what's the second phase of the transfer of the VSGL frameworks into open governance. So the background here is we transferred, I believe, 5 frameworks in the original from Uber in the original phase. And DeckGL, LumaGL, LoadersGL, ReactMapGL, and but the VSGL suite of frameworks is actually quite a bit bigger, and so a number of these frameworks they're very much part of the VSGL suite. They are basically maintained by the same group of people, but they were still at Uber and not under open governance, and so what's happening right now is that it looks like things are on track for a transfer of these within this month. And so the legal paperwork has been submitted to Uber, and I'm hearing positive noises from that side. They want to close actually by mid-March. And so the frameworks that are covered are, so there is a VSGL repo, which is really just contains the website, the VSGL website. And it's already in UCF, but the domain was not transferred. So this will be very helpful. There's actually a domain issue right now. It's been hacked on GitHub. So we had that. I have to work for Uber to get through that pesky issue. Then we have another very exciting framework that's done by Chris Gervang, who's now at Joby. It's HubbleGL. It's a video generation framework for DeckGL. Some absolutely amazing stuff that can be done with that. There's a couple of more kind of supporting frameworks, but that are quite important. We have MathGL, which is a geospatial and 3D math framework for VSGL, and it has a number of additions lately that we've contributed. There is support for instance, arbitrary geospatial reprojections. There is now also support for geoids, basically, compensation for the Earth gravity model across the globe and so on. So some pretty advanced math, and it'd be great to have it in the framework. There's ProbeGL, which is JavaScript debug tools. And then there is Ocular, which is the dev tools that we use, and website publishing tools that we use for all the frameworks. And there is a small repo Mjölnir, which is takes care of browser event handling for all these frameworks. So this will, according to the best of my notes, this will basically put the entire VSGL suite in under open governance with UCF, which is great. And this is kind of Ilya Bojandin's part. I guess you're in the meeting, Ilya. So Flowmap is a really interesting project that's built on DeckGL. It consists of 2 frameworks. And Ilya developed these while at Teralytics. And Flowmap Blue is the fundamental framework is Flowmap GL. It's DeckGL layers for supporting Flowmap. That is currently owned. It's open source under Apache 2, but it's owned by Teralytics. And to my knowledge, there is no discussion about transferring that into UCF. But then on top of Flowmap GL, there's Flowmap Blue. Those are React applications for Flowmap. And that's Ilya's framework, and he is in the process of contributing that to the UCF.
Now, like for Flowmap GL, there was a discussion with Teralytics. I've got their verbal agreement, and I sent them the papers to sign for the transfer, but they still haven't responded. I pinged them a few weeks ago, they didn't answer. But yeah, I think maybe if you, maybe we should write them again, and if we find some compelling reasons for them to really go further with that, I think we can get it through.
I'm very happy to sync with them and see if I can apply my powers of persuasion and see if we can. This would be a very nice addition. I think one question is whether this should be under the VSGL suite, open governance meetings, or it should be a separate activity, and that's something we could offer to Teralytics, whichever they are more, if they want to lead this open governance separately, or if they would like it to be managed. So that's one of the knobs I think we have at our disposal. But this is another very exciting addition. It's a very powerful framework, and it'd be great to have it in the UCF. Next. Yeah, so the VSGL homepage, and as I said, unfortunately, as I was updating it, I got into this annoying issue with GitHub, so where people can hijack the domains, and so I don't think it works right now, but I'm getting it restored. This is kind of the main site for the entire VSGL framework suite. And the goal here is to update the websites of all the frameworks, to kind of emphasize that these are open governance frameworks, in the Linux Foundation /UCF, and put those logos there, and then link back to this page, right? So this was previously a page that was centered around a couple of years old, centered around the Uber visualization team, but it has been updated to talk about this as an open governance effort and to emphasize those aspects of it. And also, this is, in response to discussion in last meeting, where especially Javier kind of asked for, like, what is really the VSGL suite? What's the scope when we, evaluate new frameworks, whether they should be part of it? What should we consider, right? And so I've also made, try to, paint a picture of what this is, all about. We have a lot of blog posts related to this. They're all on Medium, which has a terrible interface for browsing them. So there's a blog page that lists all the blog posts. And there is also a news page so that we can get external posts in there. So, Carto has some beautiful posts about their adoption of DECGL, recommendations around basemaps. And so, I think I'd love to have those there as well.
A quick just little call out, if you send me the copy for these blog posts, I can also add them to the UCF website as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. They will all be linked here, so we can.
Cool. Yeah, I can just copy and paste them over too.
Exactly. So, and another thing obviously is that as the big contributors right now, it's Unfolded and Carto. So we obviously want to have our logos up there and get links back for such engine optimization and other reasons. And so we're going to put that and try to do that tastefully. And then it'd be interesting to also list the main contributors and sponsors. So I'm wondering if I'd love to put the logos of the companies that are actually, part of the, paid members of the foundation. I guess that's here and Uber. And then we have had big contributions from, for instance, Google and S3. And I'd love to, and I assume I have to reach out to those companies before we actually put their logos there. Then, I know this came up and I got pretty strong negative feedback, but I still think it would be good to have some kind of link to maybe it's a separate site that we can build that we can just link to that describes where you can get, engineering help if you want to build on these things.
Yeah, we do have to be a little cautious around those. If there's specific use cases, I would just have to run it by the LF Legal Counsel to see what we're allowed to do and since it's a nonprofit, like what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do on those.
Yeah.
But we can have a little email, or we can have a quick sync just to run through the use cases.
Yes, I understand that, but I do think it is valuable to show to the community that, you know, this is available, right? So when big companies are, you know, is looking at this, you know, I think that's, you know, the fact that is an option there. So
Absolutely. There's something.
the goal is less to sell, you know, engineering services. The goal is more to show how comprehensive this ecosystem is, right?
We might want to look at doing a conformance program. That's a way that you can, under the like blessing of the trademark and everything, have a way to say like we are officially a UCF or a VSGL like provider or supporter. And that's something that we can do within the TAC. So that makes something we wanted to explore kind of for the project, because that's a way to like, with the blessing of, you know, the legalities around the trademark usage, to be able to say, yes, this is an official UCF or VS.GL like supported company, or we use an official version of this.
I like that very much.
Yeah, that's something we should look into.
And I can also, there also like, I think, you know, Gail, you've discussed about this in the previous one, but would it be possible also to consult, like if in that page where we're like describing what is the status of the ecosystem from a kind of like commercial perspective, you know, companies that can provide services, would it be possible if just by putting some copy of text at the top saying like the Urban Computing Foundation does not actually entitle any of these companies, this is here just for reference for anybody, or something like that, something legal that doesn't kind of like put, you know, the UCF into trouble, but it's still kind of like, as a community, we think this will help the project. So if, you know, like, so that we can showcase that.
So I think what we should do is we have a trademark expert on our staff that I'll bring into the next call, so we can have like, because I'm not a lawyer, I don't know I just know that there are some restrictions around it, so I can just ask him to attend the next call, so we can have like an in-depth discussion around like what kind of usage is supported or allowed. Does that sound good to you guys?
Sounds great.
Okay, Sean, let's add that to agenda for the next month. That way I can bring him in and he can provide a way better explanation than I can.
Yeah, let's keep a note on that.
Well, the final remark is more, you know, this is really about promoting these frameworks and the UCF, right? And so there's a substantial amount of work that we're currently putting into these websites, and you know, it'd be, if there ever was a funding, if there ever was an ability for the, you know, UCF to help, I think this would be like one of the first areas we could really, you know, I think would make a lot of sense. And I think we, on our side, on Unfolded Sites, we have, you know, external, you know, resources, some agency that could help us really bring these websites to the next level. And it wouldn't take a lot of money. So that's just kind of an idea that I'm putting out there. Because I mean, right now it's kind of Sean and myself that are spending our evenings trying to make this look good. So, all right. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we recently released VSGL 8.4. I want to give some highlights, mostly in DeckGL. A lot of, you know, so what happened, a lot of interaction improvements. Mobile devices has been a weak area, so much better interaction on mobile devices. There's like a three-finger swipe gesture. You can now do full 3D control on mobile devices. There's inertia in the controller, so when you stop, if you pan, it kind of continues to move a little bit after you release the mouse or the finger, giving that kind of extra feeling of polish. Then we have a big contribution from Carto, who has done a lot of work on the tile, the Mapbox vector tile layer. We support now tile JSON metadata. We have ability to query the features that are in the viewport. And we can handle, you know, we have additional support for, you know, the, for providing coordinates and so on in callbacks. The other big thing is that the MVT layer now supports binary mode. It's also a lot of work from Carto, leveraging some of the work that Unfolded did in VSGL. And at the moment, we have about 2x performance improvements when loading Mapbox vector tiles in binary mode, and we think we can further improve that in the next release. Carto has also has its own module in DeckGL and has added some really nice helper functions to do data-driven color controls. So that's another nice addition. Next. There's a lot of improvements to the layers. There are no new layers, but there is improved integration with loaders.gl. So the layers, you can now specify the loaders that you want the layer to use when you're supplying URLs to it. You have performance optimizations, heat map layer, which does GPU aggregation, can now, you now have additional modes for the GPU, for the aggregation mode. The bitmap layer now allows you to do pixel level picking on the GPU. And there's more support for dealing with the anti-meridian. So when you show the entire Earth, or especially when you show things around Australia, New Zealand, you get the issue that you can get artifacts when lines cross the anti-meridian. And there's most layers now have support for dealing with that. So a lot of that's kind of tricky corner cases when you deal with geospatial that I think is one of the big strengths of DeckGL and the maturity that it has, that it deals with those things that you eventually run into. Next. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the big Esri contribution. This is a collaboration with Unfolded and Esri, the big investment in I3S support. I3S is a big, one of the two big stand-ups for massive 3D data, streaming in data, either point clouds or, texture geometry, photogrammetry, city scale data. If you go to, it's been presented at the initial phase has been presented at the OGC. I linked to the presentation here, the 3D working group, but let's take the next slide and see how it looks. So the initial deliverable from this project is a converter between the cesium-backed 3D tiles format for these types of data sets and the Esri-backed I3S set format. And so these are both OGC standards, and the conversion goes both ways. You can convert to an entire tile set in batch mode, a multi, terabyte tile set from I3S to 3D tiles or the converse. And this is a converted tile set. You can see the level of accuracy and detail. It's quite an involved process. So VSGL, to my knowledge, is the only open source solution that supports both of these standards. And next slide. So yeah, here's another sample. This one loaded in, I think the previous one was loaded in ArcGIS. This one is loaded in cesium. So here you can see, the previous one was a 3D tile, cesium 3D tiles tile sets converted to I3S, loaded in ArcGIS, and this is basically an I3S S3 ArcGIS tile set converted to 3D tiles and loaded into cesium. Next. This is a side-by-side. So this is, I believe this is in ArcGIS, and you basically have ArcGIS Online, and you have a tile set that was natively tiled in I3S on the left. You have a 3D tile set that's converted using the loaders.gl converter on the right, and you can see, we're using this type of visual comparisons to verify the fidelity of the conversion. Next. Just another example. This is, and then also kind of calling out that this deals with, so there are a few open source solutions for rendering either of these, not solutions that support both formats, but they tend to only implement a subset. Some of the really difficult parts is dealing with the segmentation, being able to identify and highlight individual objects and so on. So this converter goes all the way and is able to convert metadata and preserve the structure and segmentation of the meshes. So and that was it for me.
Thanks. Is there any questions from the audience or discussion we'd like to talk about?
Hey, thought from Drew here. So I know an ongoing, just kind of high level question has been, how the VSGL tooling relates to Mapbox GL tooling, and it's really interesting to see the two touching on similar functionality over time, and so I'm always curious to hear more on sort of the philosophy of what's best for each of those tool sets. But I wonder if also these types of questions are things other people think about and are maybe ideas for blog posts and content marketing for others coming in and wondering which tool to use for which type of purpose.
Yes, so a couple of comments on that. So, so DecGL is designed to be, basemap agnostic. So what there's certainly true that Mapbox has some data visualization capabilities, but basically the setup that we have is that we think of Mapbox as a basemap. And so we have very strong support. We have a, very comprehensive React wrapper for Mapbox, React MapGL. And DecGL is designed to work seamlessly with that, but it's completely optional. We also have a module for Google Maps integration, and we're also working on a completely DecGL, DecGL basemap layer that will be, obviously rendering basemap is rather sophisticated, so but there will be a basic basemap layer building on the Carto MVT tile layer work that will be able to just, load an arbitrary basemap and render it. And so it really depends, because it's often when you're doing data visualization, the basemap is just there to provide context. And, it's really, you want to kind of have it in a muted color, and you really want to highlight the visualization with, strong contrasty colors on top of it. And so in some cases, you really don't need that much of a basemap. But for some use cases, you really want all the detail and information and fidelity of a commercial basemap provider. And so we're trying to support that, and we have we're interested in integrating with additional basemaps. So and we have the Arc to support that. We also have integration with ArcGIS Online. It's a little bit custom, but it does work. You can use ArcGIS Online as a basemap. And if you look specifically at React MapGL, what happened in the last release was, in response to Mapbox v2 going, over to a commercial license, we're now supporting. So in React MapGL, you can choose from either using Mapbox v1 or Mapbox v2, and there's also a kind of an open project called MapLib, so you can choose the renderer you want. And if you really need the quality of the Mapbox v2, you can choose that and go for paid option. And if you want a completely free option, you can use that. So maybe you have more specific questions, but that's it.
With that being said, I think going back to your question, I think right now you are right that I think it can be quite confusing, the status of like the relation between libraries like Mapbox, but not only Mapbox, Google Maps, ArcGIS, a lot of like different color basemap libraries, and DecGL. I think that's still an issue, and there's also like some unsolved problems. So we're working, for example, now in better integration with Google Maps and DecGL too, and yeah, so there's a number of them. But for example, there's open issues around interleaving. So, like if you use a basemap provider that does 3D in the form of, like what Mapbox has done with version 2, well, you're gonna have problems overlaying, like DecGL color layers on top of them. So what I'm trying to say with that is like, I do agree that it's actually could be very beneficial to kind of like do blog posts that, like go into into explaining fit for purpose. Like you're saying, like, hey, well, if you are looking at, like doing this type of thing, like just take these things in consideration. So I do agree. Actually, I think that's a pretty good idea, and I think like in the long run, I've been discussing this with Eve and others that like I think we will need to provide a solid full solution that is kind of like UCF or VSGL kind of like compatible in a way. Because like right now the situation, I don't think it's super. I mean, it's okay to be basemap agnostic, but at the same time, I mean, like we are not going to be able to stay basemap agnostic for too long if they keep adding stuff that is confusing with our kind of like engines, or that just even cannot overlay one to another. I'm talking about the three things, so 3D stuff. So that's, I think, something we want to. And meanwhile, I mean, like a blog post kind of like talking about, like explaining the ecosystems and the relation, I think can be very beneficial. So I think that would be, for me, that's the type of like perfect blog post for BCL blog.
Sounds great. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts.
Okay, sounds like we have some action item to do here as well. I will coordinate with Ib and other who are interested in contributors blog posts that started some kind of draft around there. Next agenda, we have some project update from CartGL. So over the past year at Unfolded, we have been building our application completely on top of the visualization part on top of CartGL. So in terms of contribution we made a lot of architectural improvements to the CartGL stack, making it easy for any company to build application on top of it. A lot of improvements around data handling refactor, generalize the layer architecture, adding specific type definitions to the code base, and then converting more components into replaceable components so that they can be easily discovered and replaced if you want to build an application around that. And now we know that some of these are now visible to a certain extent. If you, for people who the only use case they use Kepler is go to Kepler, the demo site, they might not see any visible improvement or features that they requested being added there. So for us, it's also a constantly debate: should we invest in more on the feature, or should we instead improve our architecture so other people can easily build features without have to go through this complicated tech stack to figure out where everything is. So in the end, I think because we are driven by our product, we decided to invest a lot of it into the architecture side of things. But besides that, we do added more features. I think this is more like last year. I would say like a lot of our feature additions are collaborating with external contributor companies who are invested also in wanting to integrate Kepler. So one of the things we added is the cloud provider architecture that mainly driven by contributions from Cardo. But the Kepler team does spend time on making this generalizable, so you can add more cloud providers. And we have another PR up to add AWS, another provider, instead of just Cardo and Dropbox. In addition, there are, we're excited to see other companies' contribution to specific features. And for Unfolded, we added we added loader shell integration to stream larger files. Now you can upload files that are larger than 256 megabyte up to a gigabyte, as long as your browser can handle. We also improved the layer detection logic, and from 7Park data, we collaborating on contribute on the geocoder integration and tooltip formatting. From GISPO, we collaboration on adding localizations. you know, translations around Spanish, Spanish, Finnish, and other translations to the Kepler GL demo app. Yeah, so that's my brief updates on the Kepler side. Is there any questions and discussions?
Hi, San. This is Javier. So, yeah, I'm just curious about this. So you're mentioning about improvements on the architecture and all that. So, so what's kind of like a little bit, you know, like just so since I know that you guys have released Unfolded Studio, how do you foresee this kind of like going over the future? I mean, how just so that we understand what is the level of cooperation that you're looking at having at Kepler EL?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. In fact, we're also wanting to write a blog post about it, to discussing Unfolded Studio and Kepler. So I think from our point of view that, you know, Kepler obviously is an open source framework. So anything that specific Kepler added, we will contribute back to Kepler GL itself. But also,
You went
also
mute.
we realized, sorry, I know, my throat is not feeling very well. But also because we realized that Kepler by itself is just a client-side app. So that when we want to build application on top of that, specifically when it comes to data integrations, you know, large data processing, we will have to build our own backend to support that use cases. So when we are realizing that we are the architecture improvement we're putting specifically make it easier to connect to different databases, make it easier to adding, you know, a different API calls, so we can support that when we need to have backend processing and so on and so forth. And also, you know, adding new layers when that layers need a specific data processing itself, we convert the layer architecture so that it makes it easier to adding new additional layer type. And obviously, in general, we want to make the API more easier or exposable to the people who, the different companies who want to develop application on top of Kepler. So improvements made there will be adding type definitions. And we're also trying to, you know, convert our current API doc by using type doc. So that will make it better for people who are using our libraries.
Yeah, I think from our side also, I mean, we're evaluating to see if there is we know that a lot of companies are using Kepler, but the amount of contributions in terms of features, a lot of companies are building very nice feature additions, but there's very few things coming back, right? And so I think, you know, if this is a one-way street, I think we're going to be less kind of motivated to contribute our features back. But if we see that there is a community that, you know, is really contributing into Kepler, I think that'll be, you know, that's our hope that we can get to that point, right? And then that'll be a very interesting situation. So.
Okay, thanks. I have another question, and it's regarding around the architecture. So, so it seems like Kepler GL kind of like uses an underlying kind of like data model for the visualizations that create that in a way. Obviously, they are different than TAC GL because TAC GL is more like in the programmatic, but you know, there's also like this area around declarative TAC GL. So I mean, like looking at, you know, like back in the days, I mean, like one of the things that, you know, we've always been discussing about like this, would it make sense to kind of like try to standardize the usage of something like declarative TAC GL as a language for cartography and then make Kepler kind of like make use of that? Or do you have visions around it? Because it just feels like there's two ways to right now kind of like, there's like the Kepler GL way and then there's the TAC GL way of kind of like expressing cartography.
It may be a little bit technical answer, but we do have a kind of a declarative JSON language for TAC GL, and you know, obviously,
yeah,
when you save a map in Kepler, it's serializes to JSON, and it's different. You know, Kepler does a lot of additional things on top of the XGL. And I mean, there's certainly discussions that could be had around that. DECGL could do some of the things that Kepler is doing. There is, you know, kind of automatic inference and stuff like that going on in Kepler, and some of that could be pushed back. But right now, I think there is a fairly substantial gap between the two, and it would definitely take, you know, a substantial effort to align them. It is interesting, but it would have to be, you know, there would have to be someone who is really motivated to work with us on that.
Okay, so not a real expectation. I mean, yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I think that the word cartography here is actually on point, where we want to make Kepler analytic instead of just drawing maps. So a lot of the, you know, the schema of the layers are kind of designed in a sort of data science language. Instead of saying that, you know, here's my data, render it this way, you say, it's there, here's my data, color it by this, apply this type of scale, and then Kepler just do the transformation for you and then send it to the XGL. So, and I don't see it necessarily in the end we are using the same language, especially because they are, at least when we first developed these two things, they are specific towards different audience. Even though we now realize that almost, you know, people are every time, no matter what audience they're trying to look at, select one or another. So your maybe next thing for us is actually specifically be clear about different use cases, right? If you are data science, you don't know much about, you know, graphic programming or even just drawing maps by itself, then maybe you use Kepler. Or if you're a developer, you're familiar with all the data transformation, you don't need help to calculate, say, a linear scale or a quantized scale, then, you know, you can use the DECGL's JSON definition.
Yeah, I guess I'm more coming from the use case of, you know, like developers that use Kepler here for prototyping the visualization, the map, and then, you know, like bringing that to an application that is done with DECGL. So that's kind of like the, which is a very common like use case in Carto. So that's what I was wondering in there, right? So,
and you could
yeah, that's actually,
you could potentially develop an export feature, right? That exports this into a DECGL. You know, JSON.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you guys think in that direction, because, you know, like this is something that we will be interested in. And so, yeah,
I think it's a great feature idea that we can take offline.
Yeah, I agree. If you make it specific, I think this is a good proposal, because I also talked to many Kepler users that, you know, they use Kepler to prototype, and then in the end they will write in their own application in DECGL. So there are definitely some gaps we can fill in there from Kepler to DEC.
Which in that sense, I think will complete a lot the DECGL color community, because right now DECGL doesn't have necessarily a very easy way to color play with it. In fact, actually, most people, the way that I think they play with DECGL is by using Kepler, which can be quite confusing, but, you know, like, it's not what I mean. So, and also on the lights, on the ownership, Kepler GL itself still is part of Uber, right? Is there? Right, that hasn't changed.
No, it's fully in the Urban Computing Foundation.
Okay, because on the copyrights on the it's still
that we never change. Okay. Yes,
okay, got it.
The title.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, let's add it on the action item. But it's fully contributed to Urban Computing Foundation.
Great.
Okay, we have 15 minutes left. There's no more questions. Shall we move on, or? Okay, let's move on to the last item we have. So we have some ECF membership update on this. Google, so on the board side, originally we have Google, Facebook, Uber, and here as UCF members, and you guys are on the technical committee. last year, Google and Facebook has exit the foundation. So now we have only Uber and here as general as members, which made us propose a new membership tier for smaller companies that has a lower annual fee. So this is the new tier we just we added. For companies with up to 500 people, we have a tier for $2,000 a year, and for companies that are larger than 500, we have a tier for $5,000 a year. So this will help us attract more members to join.
And just a little call out. So I'm your program manager for Urban Computing Foundation, and I work for LF. And with Google and Facebook exiting the foundation, it does bring down the revenue coming into the foundation to support Urban Computing Foundation. That includes all the projects. So that's stuff for GitHub, any infrastructure, websites, domain names, anything that goes to those projects comes from the funding for UCF. And so with those two members leaving, it kind of cuts that in half and it leaves you with a smaller amount of budget. So you as the TAC really are kind of the most engaged and have the best insight into who uses the different technologies, who are your contributors. So if you do with this new membership tier, we're hoping to increase participation from outside companies. So we're not so dependent on if one company leaves, then we're out of money for the foundation. If right now we have 2 left, and if those 2 left, we wouldn't have any money left for the foundation. And we want it to stick around. We want it to keep growing. So I really encourage you, if your company wants to join, or if you know of a company that's contributing to maybe one of the umbrella projects and could come in at one of these tiers, it would really be helpful for the foundation. So just let me know and I can get you the right information. I know Unfolded is planning to come in as a general member, and I just need to get the information over to them and get it finalized on my side. But if you have anyone else that you think could be a good member, just let me know and I can get the right information over to you. And I just really encourage you to help with that, because it does help sustain the technology that's growing here, because there's some really cool stuff growing here, with the umbrella projects. So any questions on that, and like what it means to be a general member, what benefits a company would get out of it, anything like that?
Yeah, I actually do. So we've been asking for like this lower cost, for entering, with Carto. So we will be happy to probably join too, with this. So great for that. But before that, I think something that we are missing is like, well, is there any public information about how the resources of so if I understand, like last year's budget probably was on the order, like considering that there were 4 and each of them were paying $15,000, we're talking to a minimum $60,000 of budget. Where did the budget go? It doesn't go all to GitHub and website and domains. So where is all that money going right now?
It does go to GitHub and it goes to the website and the domains for sure. That's part of where it goes. There's a fee for my services as a program manager, and then we have money set aside. It's a pretty light budget, and I plan on sending it out to you guys as a TAC kind of coming up in the next month. But for the most part, what you'll see the money go to is program management, which is someone like me, and that's an LF fee. There's G&A stuff for like accounting, that kind of back office function stuff that the LF manages for the foundation, doing like tax filings, any of that kind of financial back office function components. We usually have a little bit of money set aside for legal as well, for any trademark renewals, because we do manage the trademarks for the foundation. So for example, like the MapSend renewal is up in the next 12 months. So the foundation pays for that. And then we have a small reserve set aside for website changes and press releases. So we have a small budget to do a couple of key press releases. That way, when there's a new member coming in or a new project voted in, we can do a press release. So last year we did Kepler's. We haven't been able to do the viz.gl press release yet because it's still been the paperwork's been in progress, but once that all signed off, we can do a press release for that. So we have it kind of spread apart into little small buckets, and it's all operational costs because we don't have a lot of excess. If we grow and have more excess, then we can start doing events and things of that nature, but we don't have that money just yet.
Got it. But one
Yeah.
of the things that, like, just so I understand it, one of the responsibilities of the technical architecture committee that we have in here was also to evaluate proposals to the Urban Computing Foundation in terms of, like, for funding.
Yeah.
That's irrelevant at this point because there's no funding.
Yeah, there's not enough money. The bucket's too small. When we have more money, then there will be money to request for things for the projects. There's just not a lot in that pool right now.
Got it. Well, I think that is relevant because, like, just as a general call, like, discussion here, I think, like, we should, I don't know, if, like, maybe for next, meetings, like, we should revise a little bit what the goal of TAC. I mean, I like it, as you can see. I mean, there's definitely collaboration going on here between some of the companies, and I really appreciate that, that there's all the other people, inside the group, which it's great that we have. But I think, might actually make sense to also, like, reconsider what is that we are doing, so that, like, we can then maybe kind of, like, also incentivize more companies to join, like, like having Facebook and Google to leave. Have we done do we know why they left? They just didn't get any value out of these, just got restrictions or something like that. Would be good, I think, to do a refresh about why we are doing all this.
I think that's great, Javier. I think that would be a wonderful, like, goal for the TAC to say, like, because the board kind of figures out what's our strategy. They're more financially focused. So for the TAC to say, what is, what do we want to show to the board? What do we want to show to potential partners? And figure out your strategy for what projects you want to bring in, how you want the TAC to be composed. So right now, like, for example, the TAC voting members are the original ones that were set out when the project started. The project's been around for almost 2 years now. So maybe it's time for you as TAC to say, okay, that's who we started off with. How do we want to change the composition? What do we want to add? So it's all things that's you guys get to choose how to run the TAC and how it's composed. That's all up to you. So I think that would be a great thing to start working on. I think that's a great topic, Javier. Really, I encourage you to kind of keep going down that route.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. So from, working as tech chair for a couple of months and then discussing things with the board, I feel like there might be usually it's a little gap, the boards actually doesn't have a lot of visibility of all the exciting things that, we're discussing in the TAC. So, and that's partially, me, I was, trying hard to presenting to the board, but also another disconnect continuity. I feel like it's, the board general members, when we first set up Google, Facebook, Uber, at that time, there only one project in it, which is Kepler GL, and neither Google or Facebook at that time have much expectations out of the project. And as the project has been grown so much, maybe it's also a time to refresh all the board visions on, okay, here's how the project to today, here's the status of everything. Let's let the board have much more visibility of the project, also even invested in the project, so to decide it then the general direction of the UCF and have them be more involved. That's why we created this general member tier, so we can have that's a smaller company join the board and having more visibility or a stronger connection between the board and the TAC to push this foundation forward.
Yeah, that's great, Sean. That's exactly. I mean, it is a good time. You guys have been around for about 2 years, almost 2 years. So it's a good time to, like you said, Javier, look at the strategy and say, well, we can't with 2 years ago. Does it still apply today? How we're composed for voting members. Does that still apply today? Do we need to go back and revisit? That's all a lot of good content. Well, any more questions on kind of like this part of the foundation? I know this is like, what do they call it? Like belts and suspenders. It's like the boring operational stuff. It's not the cool tech stuff. It's but I know we don't talk about it a lot, but any other questions on kind of this and the operations? I don't see any unmutes. If you think about, if maybe after we hang up and you're to have some kind of questions or things you want to know more about, I'm on the UCF Slack, or you can email me as well if you have any questions. I think we're good, Sean, on this one. I don't see anyone else unmuting.
Okay, so that's the agenda for today. And thank you guys for joining. We have a couple of action items coming out of today's meeting. It was like worth working on. And also we have a topic for next meeting to discuss some of the rules of TAC and what we should move on, moving forward as the TAC. So I will continue the discussion offline, and let's all meet up again next month.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.